Ken Forster, Executive Director at Momenta. Welcome to our Digital Thread podcast, produced by, for, and about digital industry leaders. In this series of conversations, we capture insights from the best and brightest minds in digital industry. They're executives, entrepreneurs, advisors, and other thought leaders. What they have in common is, like our team at Momenta, they are deep industry operators. We hope you find these podcasts informative, and as always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Good day and welcome to episode 202 of our Momenta Digital Thread podcast series. Today I'm pleased to host Alistair Fulton, the former general manager of LoRa Wireless and Consumer Sensing at Semtech. Alistair has over 20 years experience building vertical solutions, tools, platforms, and ecosystems in the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things. From early roles at O2 in the UK leading strategy and business transformation following their demerger from British Telecom, he moved into developing vertical IoT solutions for clients in the US as part of Deloitte Consulting's telco practice in New York. More recently, he joined Microsoft, where he led their entry into the IoT platform and tool space, incubating the first iteration of Azure IoT, leading M&A for cloud capabilities and tools, and driving Microsoft's IoT developer tools and OSS strategy. He subsequently joined Hitachi to lead product management and technology as part of the founding team that built the award-winning Lumada Industrial IoT platform, which pioneered the use of digital twins to reduce customers' time to value. Most recently, he joined Semtech in 2018 to lead their wireless IoT business. Alistair is a recognized IoT thought leader, public speaker, and visionary. So, Alistair, welcome to our Digital Thread podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Ken.
And a pleasure to have you. I know you and I had lots of chances to work together over the last several years. And I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed the relationship. So as we started to think about guests for this new season of podcasts, it made clear sense to have you and finally corner you, if you will, so that we could have a great conversation around LoRaWAN, Semtech, and your very rich background in the IoT. So excited about this. So we call this the Digital Thread Podcast. And we always start with the question, what would you consider to be your digital thread? In other words, the one or more thematic threads that define your digital industry journey.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I've kind of been thinking about it. And I guess my journey to this point has been joined together by one core theme. And that's to making it simpler for the companies on this planet that extract, produce, or distribute things to use power of data and analytics to be more efficient and more profitable and really less wasteful and damaging to the environment. And I think going back to my earliest days at O2, and to date myself, that's the days of WAP, when we were still talking about the excitement of 2G and the emergent 3G, pre the wide scale availability of things that we call smartphones today. The massive potential of ubiquitous connectivity, and I don't know whether you know Mark Anderson, who's a futurist for the company SNS, something that he'd always described as always on real-time access, or AORTA, going back to actually the late 90s. The potential of the ability to connect everything to really transform the way we live was really clear even then. I mean, back then it was voice and pictures, really, and then subsequently video when the devices got a bit better. But as wireless networking technologies continued to evolve, the possibility of actually connecting everything, every single thing, every asset, truck, meter, cow, car, it went from being something that only the most well-resourced or regulated companies could afford to do with wired M2M and SCADA solutions to becoming something that potentially other companies could use as well. Now, the issue then, as actually still now, is that working with these technologies requires often very specific development skills that are scarce very often. Or you have to build a custom solution to every problem because you couldn't buy anything that's standardized. You couldn't kind of put it together yourself. There weren't platforms or solution components. Now, if you could afford to pay a company like Deloitte to build that for you, then great. Or if you could afford to find and hire and maintain your own software development teams, even better. But that meant that only a few companies could take advantage. And why that matters is probably clearer to us now in ways that it wasn't back then. If we don't make access to these types of technologies, which marketers and analysts have kind of glommed together under this headline of IoT, but actually is really a diverse and wide range of technologies that span everything from sensors that collect data about the physical world, networks that transport that data, edge computing so you can process some of it close to the edge, digital models or twins that model systems to manage data, storage analytics, security, the list is long. Making those technologies ubiquitous, simple, and cost effective. If we don't do that, then we're not going to be able to slow down or maybe even reverse the centuries of damage that humans have inflicted on this planet. And we're not going to be able to extend the time that the human race can comfortably spend on this planet, just a little bit longer, which in many ways is the goal of what we call IoT. So I've focused my career on making those technologies simple and accessible, from custom solutions that kind of deliver a quick ROI to cloud-based platforms that make it easy for software developers to design, applications that collect and aggregate and analyze data, to customizable industrial IoT platforms that aim to deliver more value out of the box or enable products that come already connected and able to optimize their own efficiency or performance for customers who maybe aren't or don't want to be expert software developers. I mean, today we're obviously in a very different place than when I started at Microsoft back in 2009. There are a wide range of easy-to-use tools and platforms available today. And so I spent the last few years kind of following on that thread, focused on tackling one of the big, scary challenges that really remains in this space, and that's providing a solution to connecting the many billions of sensors we need to measure the world, cheaply, for very low power, wherever they are on the planet. And again, making that technology simpler to use.
It's interesting. I asked the digital thread question to be really open-ended, right? Not being too specific. And some will talk very much about their history. Some will talk about, current activities. I think you're one of the first to turn this into purpose, right? In some sense, it's the purpose-driven, if you will, thread, right? And I think that's quite commendable, especially the way you weave in kind of the humanity and the planet perspective into all of this as well. In some sense, it actually is an interesting backdrop to overlay against your profile, which is actually very impressed. I spent a lot of time across and on the same side of the table over the last several years with you. But I must say, I came up to a whole new respect for your background and such when I really started looking at the work you had done for the purposes of putting together this podcast. So impressive, I guess. So, all the way from leading business transformation to O2, working in the telco practice at Deloitte, and then let's say up through and including your time at Microsoft, really impressive work that you had done. If you had to summarize all of that into 3 learnings relative to IoT, what would those be?
Interesting. And I'd say I've been privileged enough to work on some very interesting things with a lot of people who are a hell of a lot smarter than me. And I think I draw from that kind of there's 3 big learnings if I was to call them out. I mean, the first I would say is when you look at the landscape of technology, there are winners and losers. There are technologies that really gain traction and there are ones that were a great idea but didn't really go anywhere. And of course, there are some which weren't a great idea in the first place. But the technologies that win are the ones that do the job well enough. And I emphasize well enough. It doesn't have to be the best solution. It has to work. It has to fill the bill required. Technologies that have lots of friends, wide ecosystem to drive adoption and actually evolve that technology and really put the voice of the customer into R&D. And not surprisingly, that are simple to use. So I'd say that's the first key learning. Those that win, do the job well enough, have lots of friends, are simple to use. The second major learning I've had over the years is that whatever you think your plan is, no matter how well you think you've analyzed the market or understood what's happening and future trends, etc., you're going to be wrong. And the safest thing to do is assume that you're wrong. And I apply this to pretty much everything in life, including business. Assume that you're wrong and know that your job is to figure out why you're wrong as quickly as possible and figure out what to do about it. And in my experience, the way to do that most effectively is to find whose problem you're trying to solve, find your customer and listen to them and figure out what it is that they're actually trying to do and how you can help them. And then thirdly, I'd say somewhat more facetiously, the other big takeaway from building solutions and platforms and everything else is customers want to eat the cake. Now, you or I care a lot about how the cake's made or how great the equipment we used was, but customers want to eat the cake. And if they don't already know what it's going to taste like, or you can't help them truly visualize it, you're wasting your time. And I say those are the 3 things.
On your point number 2 there, assuming you're wrong, somebody recently told me, in fact, I was in Taiwan over the last weeks, and somebody told me the way to be most successful in business is assume the null hypothesis. The scientific method. So assume you're wrong and look for all the reasons that you're wrong, right?
Exactly. And
And,
I say
and
that
only then when you run out of reasons, it means you must be right.
yeah, you found the right. And I say that to the folks that I've worked with on teams, and particularly newer folks who are joining the team, maybe straight out of university. And they always look at me like I'm an idiot. Why is this person, telling me that I should assume I'm wrong? But it really is true. I think we're conditioned to believe our own bullshit.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that there's a self-enforcement of, well, I must be right because I thought it, and I really need to be right, and therefore I'm going to carry on. And there are myriad technology companies that you can point to who have driven themselves down the mine shaft by convincing themselves that they're doing is wrong. And in all of that, the one thing that is not heard is the voice of the customer. Customers have the great characteristic that if you find who they are, understand their problem, and ask them the right questions, they'll actually tell you the right answer if you're smart enough to listen or clever enough to interpret what they're saying. And if you live by that rule, then you're not going to avoid getting it wrong, because you're always going to be wrong, but you're going to be right quicker than you would otherwise be.
When we did the intro, we talked about IoT and the industrial IoT. And so I noted when you made the jump over to Hitachi Vantara in 2016, that actually, really it was a global leader for their industrial IoT product management role that you played. What attracted you to the industrial IoT space in general and Hitachi in particular at the time?
Well, I think, I spent a number of years with Microsoft building what I'd characterize as a kind of Swiss Army knife set of capabilities. Do anything you want, start anywhere you want. And the big kind of takeaway for me was that for a lot of engineers, that was a really great set of capabilities to have and opened up a range of different possibilities. But for a lot of customers, it didn't give them the answer. It didn't give them the cake. It gave them the ingredients and the machine and said, hey, get on with it. And that really wasn't enough. And when you look at industrial IoT per se, industrial IoT concerns itself with customers who extract, produce, or distribute things. And it's these industries, particularly legacy or older ones like energy extraction or generation or distribution and consumption, where older equipment and older processes or ineffective business models are inherently less efficient. And it's these businesses that are responsible for a majority of the harm that we're doing to the earth. And if we can start there and make a meaningful change, then we're starting to head in the right direction. And that means actually getting into those messy, dirty industrial scenarios, sitting with a customer who's maybe a line operator in a factory and understanding what it is that they're doing day to day and how you can actually optimize that. Of course, consumer IoT is super interesting as well. Don't get me wrong. It's going to have a major impact on a whole bunch of different things, like how long you or I are going to be able to stay in our own home as we age. But we can fix those problems and not really make a dent in climate change. And I do think that we have an overriding moral priority to address what's happening to this planet. And I think we're at a point now, fortunately, where it's very difficult for folks to, and there are some, to folks to look at what's happening and deny the role of humanity in creating this circumstance for ourselves. And so it's a real moral priority for us all in technology and pretty much every line of business to do what we can. And that's industrial IoT to me.
Yeah, when you look at just raw impact, and you said it much more eloquently, but we think that is definitely where the industrial IoT and particularly, operating technology companies, where the biggest opportunity is for digitalization. And so, again, back to kind of your purpose driven. Now, I think most of our audience will know you from your most recent role. So your time at Semtech, again, joined them in 2018 as Senior Vice President, General Manager for wireless, thus LoRa, and consumer sensing business. Can you tell us a bit about your remit in this role and what you are most proud of?
Yeah, sure. At Semtech, as you said, I led the wireless and sensing business unit, which was a standalone P&L within Semtech, comprising LoRa, which is a thing I probably spend more time talking about over the last few years than anything else. But it also includes some Semtech's capacitive sensing business. So that's specific absorption ratio sensors, devices that you find in most mobile phones that moderate the power output of the antenna based on proximity to soft, wet things like your brain, and also for touch interfaces. And Semtech's really both a pioneer, an innovator, and kind of leader in the sector, having more or less invented these technologies from scratch. So really interesting business. And I also had responsibility for our power portfolio, including things like wireless charging, and also a portfolio of high reliability products. I think diodes that get sent up on spaceships. So quite a diverse portfolio, but yeah, most of the time I focused on LoRa for a number of reasons. And it's probably fairly clear, it ties back to the core kind of focus that I've had over these years. in that it has, I think, the potential to really deliver meaningful change. And also from a commercial perspective, it has a massive growth potential as a business. And we've seen some of that potential realised over the last few years, but there's still way more to come. And so, my role in LoRa spanned pretty much every aspect of hardware, software, and cloud R&D, product management, all of the go-to-market functions, through to the growth of the LoRaWAN partner, developer, and customer ecosystems. I mean, overall, the P&L numbered about 500 people at its largest, with annual revenues kind of approaching around 300 million. Regarding what I'm most proud of, I mean, that's a real tough one. We did so much along the path of making LoRa and LoRaWAN the leading LPWAN kind of connectivity for IoT. And to describe what's LoRa and what's LoRaWAN, LoRa is the radio layer, it's the physical radio, it's the hardware. LoRaWAN is the protocol that runs on top of that radio, that is an open protocol owned and facilitated by an organisation called the LoRa Alliance, which does an amazing job. There's a few, if I was to look at it, there's a few kind of big technical milestones, like launching the LoRa Edge chip-to-cloud platform. It's a world first for low-power GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth-based location. It allows you to locate assets indoors and outdoors with a cloud service backing it all up, which was a first for Semtech, which had been a more traditional semiconductor company up to that point, really. I guess extending LoRaWAN's reach to provide satellite connectivity, which has been something we've done more recently through an add-on to the LoRaWAN protocol called LRFHSS, and that makes it possible for ground-to-satellite communication, both geostationary and low Earth orbit satellites. And that's got real potential to kind of open up the untracked and uncharted parts of this world where stuff still exists, where energy, gas pipelines run through unpopulated areas. And so satellite and low power satellite has been something that we've needed to have for quite a while. But I would say the main thing that I am most proud of is the team I got to work as a part of and be a part of. And that it's a really diverse team. It spans the US, Europe and Asia. It's got many languages and people who are super deep embedded firmware developers all the way through to partner channel marketing and pretty much every culture you could imagine. And that team's one that's really united by an obsession for understanding customers' problems and figuring out the solution. And kind of seeing that team work on a day-to-day basis and seeing the things that they've come up with, turn into reality and make their way into the hands of customers itself has been astounding. To see that team unite and work through the chaos of COVID, to see them supporting each other while continuing to drive really, really rapid growth for LoRa, that was probably the most impressive thing I've experienced in my career. And so I would say that's certainly what I'm most proud of at my time there.
I'd say you have an awful lot of things to be proud of. One of the things I didn't hear, and I would consider it certainly a crowning achievement of your time there, is the acquisition of Sierra Wireless. So, of course, Semtech acquired Sierra Wireless for about $1.2 billion and actually just completed it in January this year, but of course started well before. Let me ask, what was the strategic rationale for Semtech acquiring this business?
Yeah, as you said, that's been a long journey. I mean, acquisitions of that size tend to be, and I've known the Sierra Wireless team for many, many years. The world of telco being relatively small. Perhaps not surprisingly, the acquisition ties back to what I was saying earlier. The goal of that acquisition is to deliver a simplified, uniform, and appropriate, and those three things are different, developer experience for IoT solutions, regardless of whether you're trying to build a solution that needs low power, whether you're trying to build a solution that needs the bandwidth that cellular can provide. Because at the end of the day, we as technologists, we kind of present this smorgasbord of different technologies to customers, and we're all excited because of the diversity and the range and all of the problems we're solving. And customers look at that and see complexity and confusion equals cost. And if you can unify all of those tools into a full toolkit that obscures some of that complexity, honestly, I don't need to know what happens behind the green curtain half the time, then you're providing developers and their customers with a better set of tools to get the job done, which means the more wide adoption of IoT. The second goal, I would say, really is about enabling network coverage. And again, there's developer tools and building stuff, but then there's making sure that there's network coverage that you can actually use, that's interoperable. And the LoRaWAN ecosystem has done an incredible job of building, wide area networks using LoRaWAN pretty much around the planet. The cellular world obviously has done an equally incredible job building cellular coverage everywhere. But bringing those two technologies together in the past has been quite difficult. You've always had to have, you've got your portfolio of devices that lives in the LoRaWAN world, you've got your portfolio of devices that lives in the cellular world, and actually making those two things work together and talk to each other as part of a solution has been a real headache. And so enabling ubiquitous network coverage, providing MVNO services that cover both cellular and LoRaWAN-based IoT solutions, enhancing those services through stuff that you need. I need to be able to manage devices. I need to be able to update them. I need to be able to connect them securely and authenticate that they are what they purport to be. Enhancing that, providing a platform that does all of those things, again, takes the pressure off the developer, takes the worry off the developer, and lets them focus on the thing that's really valuable, which is building an analytics-based solution that helps them figure out what's happening and how to do it better. And I'd say the third thing really is about delivering a unified partner channel experience. It's been very clear to me for a long time. When you talk to customers, you turn up and talk about LoRaWAN. That's one conversation they're going to have that day, alongside the conversation they're going to have about Wi-Fi, about Bluetooth, about Thread, about Matter. We may think that our tool is the be-all and end-all, but if that tool doesn't work well with others and isn't usable as part of a portfolio, then again, we're just making our customers' life harder. And so delivering a unified channel experience, the one-stop shop, if you like, is actually really important to help partners be effective, to grow profitably and to propagate their solutions, across the planet, regardless of whether they are OEMs, ODMs, solution providers, customers of any form. And so those really are the three core goals of that acquisition. It's a big acquisition. It's a big integration. The teams are making fantastic progress toward bringing those two businesses together. The thing that has struck me over the years that I've talked with Sierra is just how similar the teams are. They are both unified by an obsession with what customers need and are deeply technically capable in the various aspects of embedded device development all the way through to cellular network planning. So it's a formidable combination, and I'm excited to see what comes of it and the progress that is made as a result.
Yeah, and I like the way that you've positioned low power wide area technologies right side by side with cellular, and saw that developers really need to be able to explore all options in their various use cases and scenarios. Let me ask, since can't really talk too much about that low power wide area without considering the kind of recent reboot of Sigfox. What's your perspective on that? What do you think we can learn from that?
Interesting. I think the primary message that I'll take away from Sigfox, and I think Sigfox is a super interesting technology. I think it's the message really is that customers need choices between different solutions, and that interoperability and openness, they're not just things that tech companies should aspire to, something that they need to live and breathe every day to succeed. We like to talk about differentiation as engineers and as technology providers. My solution is differentiated from Ken's, you should buy mine. But differentiation, to customers means complexity. It means it's not the same. It means I'm going to have to do something different because no one tool is actually going to do the job well enough. And I think while the early days of Sigfox were really driven by a grand and noble vision, which was to provide, ubiquitous, easy to use connectivity everywhere for low power devices. And the Sigfox team made incredible progress towards that goal, to be clear. But they were hamstrung by a closed proprietary mindset in the early days, a failure to build a robust ecosystem, and honestly a miscalculation, which we are all guilty of how quickly customers would build solutions in IoT, and specifically how quickly customers would build solutions that used a proprietary technology versus the cost of actually rolling out the networks. And putting that money in the ground is no small feat, and no amount of venture funding could get them out of the hole that created. I think if you look at what they're doing now and the new leadership of Henry Bong and Philip Chu and the team at Unibiz, the Sigfox team, and there's some of the best minds in low power IoT in that team, have a new lease of life. And they've really got a second chance to make that vision a reality. And I think Henry and Philip and the team have a really deep understanding of the importance of interoperability and openness. And, with some good fortune, are really well positioned to build a very successful business going forward. And I think that provides choice. And like I said, choice is what customers need. The fact that there's one of something is not a good thing. Uniqueness is not what customers want. Differentiation is not what they want. They want things that do the job well enough, that have lots of friends, and that are easy to use. And I think that's the path that Unibiz are setting themselves on.
Yeah, no, it's a nice angle. It just so happened I had dinner last week or 2 weeks ago in Taiwan with one of the lead investors behind Unibiz. So certainly heard a lot from his perspective about why he's invested in it and what he thinks about the team as well. So, all good. Let me ask, in terms of low power wide area and LoRa maybe specifically, as we look forward, where do you see the largest opportunities and really in what sectors and use cases?
That's a tough question, because I think the simple answer would be everywhere, because if you look at pretty much every aspect of life and industry, there are needs for insight and understanding of what's happening if we're drive toward a particular goal. I mean, that's a bit of a pat answer. If I was to call out particular areas of technology, I think the delivery and enablement of location is a very, very important thing. The location is often described as the most valuable data point in IoT. Knowing where something is, as well as what condition it's in, is actually valuable. Knowing what condition it's in without knowing where it is, far less so. And so I think one of the focuses for the team going forward really is building on the LoRa Edge platform, which, as I said, is really a world first. Building on that platform to enhance its capabilities, to add more locationing technologies to enable really accurate indoor location. And the holy grail, if you like, is I want to be able to locate something everywhere. I want to be able to locate it on the factory floor. I want to be able to locate it in the warehouse. I want to be able to locate it on the road. And I want to know where it is when it goes to my customer's site. And there's actually not very many good technologies today that can provide that complete span. There's really good answers for the individual questions, outdoor location, indoor location. And those answers get better if you don't have to worry so much about power. But for little devices that have to survive on a tiny little battery or on a photovoltaic cell, those solutions aren't good enough. So I think there's a real need and opportunity and requirement to kind of drive into that area. And the other area really is, it's more of a sistership, I would say, with edge computing. It's very clear that knowing what's happening in the local area and being able to take action based upon what you see near real time, or maybe even real time, is a really critical capability. That's been hamstrung in the past by a lack of low power compute, or a lack of tools that allow you to build kind of mini ML or AI models and deploy them to the edge. And those things are really starting to pick up, and there's a lot of attention being focused there. And so I think the LoRa working in that ecosystem and helping those customers add connectivity to their product is really also a massive opportunity that I think LoRa's really well placed to take advantage of.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on both of those specific areas as well, because we see them in a number of our portfolio companies, where we see especially the advantage of being able to roll out your own LoRa network without it having to be carrier driven, right?
Yeah.
Has been indoor and in factory environments in particular has been quite interesting. And even on warehousing, distribution centers, track and trace applications, and even some cold chain tracking, we've seen some very interesting use of LoRa that I don't think you could do with cellular because of the requirement to have it out.
Yeah, I say this coming from, originally from cellular. Cellular technologies are great. The blood, sweat, and tears that goes into creating standards, and I've seen some of it firsthand, and it's messy and horrible. But the technologies work really well. The challenge in connected device technologies has always been that the business model of telcos doesn't support low-cost connections. You've got all of that infrastructure there to support customers and to deal with higher revenue streams like voice and video. But those structures are fundamentally not designed to support low cost. Now, you've seen a lot of telcos over the years try and spin out an IoT-focused business to re-engineer their business and strip cost out. And most of those have failed, more from a mindset issue than anything else. So the emergence of technologies like LoRaWAN, where you can, as a customer, I can go on Amazon, I can buy a gateway for a couple of $100, stick it in my house. There are open source platforms like the Things Network that I can use to build a connectivity solution, connect the device, ingest the data. That flexibility and that freedom is very important. But the fact that also enables a very low cost model is even more so, because when you're trying to connect everything, you can't spend $5, $10, $20 a year to connect every trash can on your drive route as a waste company. You can only afford a few cents. And so these technologies both fit the technical requirements of the job, but they also fit the commercial requirements, which is really important.
Well, look, this has been a fascinating conversation. And again, as I've had a chance to really review your background, you have a very broad platform yourself of experience, given, as we said, your kind of purpose, if you will, up front. Let me ask, what's next for you?
Yeah, good. I mean, well, I've been on a real hard sprint, I would say, for the last few years. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do, and I've wanted to do for some time actually, and I wanted to see the Sierra transaction through to the point of completion, was to take some time and spend it focused solely on my family. And that's something that people always say, but I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. And it's been very clear to me over these last few years that the years of childhood are, they pass very quickly. And I've spent a lot of my time, focused on building technologies and businesses, all the while painfully aware of how fleeting that childhood is. So getting to spend a couple of months I've had now, doing the school run and cooking dinner every night has been a really, special period of time for all of us. I've also been spending some time, advising a number of different companies that I've got to know over the years, how to grow their businesses, growing effective ecosystems, how to build partner channels, how to raise funding, what sort of M&A things to pursue, and that's been really rewarding as well, because it's been very nice to kind of say some of the things that I didn't say out loud in the past when dealing with customers, because it wasn't my place to really. So it's been quite nice to be able to roll up my sleeves and do that. And I'm starting to engage, more deeply with a handful of companies out there who I think are doing, really, really important transformative things in the connected device space, to see how I can help them accelerate. And no surprises, the areas that I find most interesting are low power edge compute, location, and energy harvesting. The ability to power devices without batteries, so that we can avoid, carpeting the planet with coin cell batteries, which is one of the concerning byproducts of IoT. So it's been a really excellent period of time, actually, I have to say, and I feel like I know my children much better than I did before, even through COVID, which is. Like I said, we spend our lives, in the world of business focusing on things like that, but, there's other things to life as well.
Yeah, no, clearly. So, that leads right into my always my final question. That is, where do you find your personal inspiration?
Well, I'd say probably the cliche answer of my children, but everyone says that, so I'm not going to say that. I've always believed that curiosity and a refusal to ever think that you've learned or understood something completely is really key to kind of a fulfilling life, if you like, or to personal growth. And so I guess one of the ways I feed that is I read a lot of things. And if I look at my desk now, what's my desk now? I've got a book called What We Owe the Future by William McCaskill, which I'm reading at the moment, which actually it encourages us to take a much more active role in positively influencing the future as a moral priority. And I think I'd recommend it actually to anyone in the audience. But it's a real eye opener, in it. It helps us kind of look up from the day to day and the thing that we're focused on our own selfish, self-interest, honestly, to think about the role that we play in society and what we need to do as part of that society to sustain us. And I guess on a similar theme, I guess this is my theme for this week, I'm also reading a book called Ikigai, the Japanese secret of a long and happy life, by a guy called Hector Garcia and Francesca Morales, which is quite different actually. It's a book that explores what motivates and sustains a bunch of folks who live in a village in Japan, which has the rather unusual characteristic of having the longest living people on the face of the planet, the most people over the age of 100 and the highest average age. And it looks at kind of the simple aspects of life that run through their existence and the sense of community that helps support people, and how working as part of the collective, again, going outside oneself, is really a critical part of what makes us function as human beings. So I'd say, and next week it will be something different. The week will be after that will be something different as well. So I guess I'd summarize all of that as what's my inspiration, growth and learning, always.
With them, great answers. I like the children too up front. So given that you've had a chance to rediscover them. So, well, Alistair, thank you for sharing this time and insights with us today.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Ken. Thanks for having me on this podcast.
Oh, yeah, and equally as so for us. So this has been Alistair Fulton, former general manager of LoRa for Semtech. Thank you for listening, and please join us for the next episode of our Digital Thread podcast series. Thank you, and have a great day. You've been listening to the Momenta Digital Thread podcast series. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and as always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Please check our website at momenta.one for archived versions of podcasts, as well as resources to help with your digital industry journey. Thank you for listening.